What is happening, everybody? So my brother and I were supposed to record today after game three of the finals, but we've decided to do it later this weekend, both for scheduling reasons and also given that the Panthers may have won the cup by then. We'll see. So we'll definitely be recording another video later this weekend to sort of go over the first four games of the series and whether or not they may have won the cup, and we can break some of that down. I think for now, in the in-between, I wanted to maybe just do a quick short video about three things that watching the Panthers, both in the run, this playoff run, the finals, but also last year, the playoff run last year, and also the year before, where they were a very different team and, fell short after finishing in first place and scoring a bunch of goals, and also watching a lot of other teams around the league closely the past few years. Just three things that I would say I've learned about other teams from watching the Panthers, in particular about their success or lack of success in the playoffs. It's specifically, which is something kind of, I think, typical to the NHL in terms of the contrasting play between regular season and playoffs. I think hockey as a sport, it's kind of strange how the game does shift a bit in the playoffs. And people want to say it's the refs or the physicality or letting people get away with stuff. There's a little bit of that, but I think more than that, it's just that there's a certain style that in the playoffs you generally kind of need. And it varies a little bit team to team, obviously. But generally speaking, I do think that there's a certain kind of way that maybe tends to give you a bit more success. Or the other way to look at it is if you don't play or if you don't have certain basic things as part of your team, you're going to have a much harder time winning a cup. And no, it's not the star players, though they do help. No, it's not having a great goalie that can help. But there are examples of elite goalies winning cups. There are examples of guys that came out of nowhere that won cups. It's not the coaching, there are examples of coaches that are very veteran that won a cup and new coaches that have won too. And I'm not saying these aren't factors. I mean, they are. But yeah, experience, the level of experience of a team, I think that matters a lot, whether or not you've been through it. But again, there are examples of teams that came out of nowhere to make a run and teams that were grinding for years and finally broke through. What I'm going to try to point to are three things that are a little bit harder to notice. And these are things that some coaches have talked about and that certain people talk about, but it is a little bit more sort of under the surface. The first part is how your star players play. And no, I don't mean just the scoring, the effort or whatever. In the playoffs, most teams are trying hard, at least to the level that they can. The first thing that I noticed watching the Panthers is that when your top players, and in this case would be, let's say, Barkov, Reinhart, and Tkachuk, and maybe even Ekblad, who's been around the longest. Forsling now, it's like the best defenseman in the team. Montour, it's also very dynamic. But let's say Ekblad, or even if you want to say Montour, when you look at the way the top guys plays, the guys that everyone else on the team looks up to and knows are the bigger names and sort of the drivers of play, when those guys play in a way that isn't just purely to score, purely to play offense, when those guys are not cheating, and I'm talking about not just in the playoffs, but as an identity for the team in general, at their best. Not every team, no team plays the entire regular season playing at their best. Bad games for players and all that. I mean, in general, the way they practice, the way they prepare, and the way that are at their best and in biggest chunks of a regular season and playoff run. If your star players are playing really smart hockey, really two-way hockey, physical hockey, willing to sacrifice themselves, if the vast majority of your leaders are doing that, it is much easier to get the rest of the team, whether they're journeymen, whether your own draft picks that you're developing, whether it's, people you're bringing in to plug in holes, physical guys, whatever it is, much easier to get them to buy in when those guys are leading the way by example. And not just how hard they practice or play, it's how responsible they play two ways in their own zone, how they avoid cheating, how they sacrifice their bodies, how they are not afraid to battle for pucks. And when you really break down the teams that have won championships, almost always like you can point to the star players doing that. And again, there may be maybe one exception. And, maybe as an example, you can say Patrick Kane with the Blackhawks, not the most physical guy, not a guy that was looking for contact, but he was a clutch scorer. And the rest of the team around him was definitely willing to battle and do all of that, including Jonathan Toews, including, all the defensemen. Like there was sacrifice all the way through that lineup. when you look at Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Penguins and Crosby and Malkin, guys that were willing to fight, to do dirty stuff, to fight in the corners. And these are guys that aren't just looking to do the fancy stuff, to do the fancy scoring, to put up all the points. I mean, obviously they're the most talented people, so they're going to tend to do that. But again, what happens is when your top guys are willing to go into the battle, to block shots, to do all of that, then you're going to see the rest of the team do that. And an example of that is maybe Tampa Bay, where Stamkos was blocking shots against the Panthers 3 years ago when they swept us. The Panthers were getting a lot of chances. We're, kind of doing what the Oilers have done to the Panthers, and they're getting more chances. They have more dynamic sort of top end talent, but with Vasilevsky, but there obviously that helps. But it was really the ability of Tampa to really hit us on the wall, to really minimize the chances, let Vasilevsky see the puck, to not let us go to the front of the net as easily, and to block a lot of shots. And that was something that they did because they had that makeup in the defense, and Stamkos was blocking shots. Everybody was. When you have those guys that are willing to battle and go through the grind and be patient and win 2-1 games and not fully cheat the game, the rest of the team, that's why the fourth line for Tampa made that big run, a few years ago. And it was instrumental in them winning. Some of the bottom 6 guys, became top 6 guys in other teams now, or you've seen Cirelli mature, you've seen Palat go somewhere else to in Jersey and get some top 6 minutes. And, that happens when that's the level of leadership. And, you can point also to one-offs, maybe not like kind of a dynasty like Tampa, but looking at the Blues, they had Petrangelo who had that experience. They had O'Reilly, even Tarasenko. These guys were in their prime, kind of more veteran guys, all willing to sacrifice. David Perron, these guys were willing to sacrifice and play two ways and play patient hockey, physical hockey, any kind of hockey that they had to in order to win. And when, again, your top guys are leading the way, much easier to do that. And I say that because when you look at other teams, and it's easy to pick on the Leafs, but when you look at the Leafs and you look at Tavares and Matthews, guys that are mostly looking to score themselves, they're not as great at passing the puck and involving other guys. They're not inherently physical. They're not inherently looking to battle. They'll do some of that in some games, but it's not their natural inclination to do that, especially throughout the year where they're trying to put up a lot of points, trying to get a lot of goals. It is just going to be much harder to inspire everyone else to really go that extra mile and to really be more structured as a team, which you need to be in the playoffs. So something I just learned from the Panthers is they said it. Barkov is the guy that sets the example. If he's doing the two-way play, if he's sacrificing, if he's not cheating, if Tkachuk is not cheating and doesn't care about getting points, everybody might say, oh, Tkachuk's not having a good series. Like he's fighting, he's battling, he's playing hard. Yesterday they made a great steal. I mean, the pass to Bennett was fantastic, but more than that, the impressive thing was how that shift, they kept them in, they wouldn't allow them out, and then Tkachuk stole the puck. And all you need is for your leader to be able to do that. That level of compete, that level of fight, and then in the defensive zone, he's hitting, he's not cheating, he's chasing guys to the point. It's not just waiting to break out. That's just going to tell everyone else you can't do that. And Maurice mentioned that in the post game of the rookies come in. It's like I just got to play my game, and Maurice is like, you don't have a game. Rookies, you don't have a game. You have skill, but especially if you're a highly sort of touted a rookie, but you have to develop a game. Barker has a game, Tkachuk has a game. These guys have a lot more experience. So your job is to kind of emulate what they do in your own way. You may have even more top-end skill, but unless you learn how to play like they do, you're going to have a harder time winning. It's why I think the Bruins have won despite the lack of talent. I mean, they've had some really good, solid players, but it's not like Bergeron and Marchand are these like guys putting 100 points a season. I mean, go look. They don't do that. They never did that. Even now with Pasternak, who's really the only star. I mean, Marchand's older, and they're still competing, making the playoffs. They have only McAvoy out there on defense. I know they have Lindholm and Brandon Carlo, but they're not, they're not the big names, sort of fancy kind of players, but they compete, man. They compete. And I think that that's a big, big difference. And so when you're looking at your own team and you're looking at your stars, whether they're young or whether they're like the Oilers who've been at it for a while or the Leafs, you got to be real about the fact that it isn't just about putting guys around them and having a deeper team. There's a reason why your defense turns it over. There's a reason why your forwards cheat. We saw that against the Oilers. Like there's videos breaking down how like David gets caught, Draisaitl gets caught. They don't track back as hard. And again, it's not saying that they're bad players. They play hard, but it's the habits, it's the leadership of like that is as important as trying to go in and trying to score. And when you're not setting an example, then you have Corey Perry cheating and not tracking back when somebody was pinching and should have, goes behind the net, and then there's a breakaway for Barkov and scores. So I think that That is very important, particularly for young teams. The second thing is how we define speed and skill. Individual speed and skill is easy to notice, and it's flashy and it's great. So you look at a team like the Devils, Jack Hughes, like super fancy. Luke Hughes too on defense, like very fancy, very skilled. Now, very physical guys are small guys, so there's a disadvantage there. But what happens is a lot of that tracking, which is kind of what McDavid does, in the playoffs, it's actually much easier to prepare for. You can prepare for that one guy. You can keep him to the outside. You can track him. You can try to block him, minimize the impact, hit him, and then knowing that they're not going to defend as hard. They're not going to trap back as hard. And you, of course, if you're in the playoffs, you probably have some top talent too to go the other way. And you know that you can also take advantage of that. And that's what Barkov's done. It isn't just about defending, but when he goes the other way, people forget that Draisaitl, McDavid, all these guys, they got to defend his line. And they're a top scoring line. I mean, Reinhart has 57 goals this season. So I think that sometimes, we say, why is Buffalo struggling even to have so much young talent? Why has Dallas not broken through, even though they have a ton of talent, and still gotten to a finals again or won a cup? Why is New Jersey, went to the playoffs, but then got destroyed by Carolina in 5 games and hasn't been back this year? Why is Ottawa, despite all that collection of young talent, can't even make the playoffs, even though they're even physical? Again, they're not structured. They don't defend. A lot of these young guys and young talent haven't been asked by their team, and that comes down to the coaches and their commitment to really get them to defend, to learn how to play two ways, to learn to sacrifice. And that in the playoffs, it isn't just about skating fast and scoring, and it isn't about the individual skill. Speed is better when it's team speed, when all of your guys are breaking out together, when they're in sync, when there's tape-to-tape passing, which the Panthers are really good at out of their zone. It isn't just looking for that one guy to break out and then everybody else tries to jump in. It's, can you do it as a team? Can you surprise? It may be Barkov who's driving the play, but it may be Rodriguez, as we saw in the 2-on-1. It may be Reinhart. And you can do that for any line. And I find like a lot of the teams, like the Penguins and all these other teams, they can do that. They could do that. They would use team speed. They would use team systems and really wear you down by making you have to defend everybody, even though you may have top-end talent on your team. And that's how also you take advantage of matchups. You can have a third line scoring against the top line because that top line, if it's not ready and it's not part of the identity to play fast together, you can really capitalize on that. And you can actually look a little bit faster, quicker in the way that you get to the other side and attack than just the one guy sort of trying to track down or having a bunch of speedy guys. I'll give you an example. Braden Point. Braden Point is incredibly fast, quick, hard to contain. But what makes him the most dangerous in the postseason is his ability to go to the front of the net and score from there. He's just a killer in front of the net. He's a small guy, but I think he just has a low center of gravity. He can take hits. He can be strong in there, and his speed helps a lot. But he's a guy that plays within the system, within the team. Plays off Kucherov, plays off Stamkos, whoever he's on, whatever line, and he plays center, but whatever line he's on, he helps drive the play, but he's part of the team, and he goes to the front of the net to try to get those key goals. They contribute in the ways that they're supposed to, and that can look a lot more dangerous. That can look a lot faster, a lot more connected than a lot of this individual young talent. So teams like Buffalo, Ottawa, New Jersey, and we see it. We see it with the young talent. A lot of the teams that you're like, why aren't they breaking through? Why aren't they making the playoffs? Or even if they make them, why are they sort of losing early? Or why does it take a certain team like the Leafs a long time to even win more than a round? I would argue it's because a lot of their team, it's not connected. It's not playing as connected. It's really looking for one or two key guys to drive the play and to do everything. And it minimizes the way that the team, it becomes actually more predictable. It's just easier to prepare for one or two guys who are individually talented and always driving play versus a team that's taking advantage of what they can provide, but it's creating the right kind of space and it's connected and playing with that speed. So I've noticed that with the Panthers. It's like individually, they don't have the fastest guy. Verhaeghe's kind of quick and Rodriguez a little bit quick. But, Lundy's not that fast. Barkov's not the fastest guy. Reinhardt's not fast. Kachuk is not fast. Bennett is quick. But again, these guys don't have like elite speed. Maybe outside of Verhaeghe. And yet, at their best, they look incredibly fast. And when I've heard Maurice talk about speed and playing fast, he does not mean like skating straight line fast. He means how quickly can you move the puck and be connected and anticipate what guys are going to be and get the puck to dangerous areas. And to me, that is something that in the coaching, that's what I look for. You have a coach that understands that, understands the commitment to the physicality, the two-way, the defense, even for the young talent, and can coach that, and also play fast as a connected team versus hey, Matthews, Marner, just drive it. Hey, Mike David, Draisaitl, you'll take care of us. That actually is kind of a trap. So that's the second thing I've learned from the Panthers: just quickness, speed, and it's not defined just by like how quickly guys can skate or how nice it looks and skilled it looks, like Jack Hughes or whatever. Like I honestly, in a playoff series, would not fear Jack Hughes. I feel like he can be contained unless he's part of a stronger system. If he were playing in Pittsburgh, if we were playing in a system like that, then I'd be terrified. But when you're not, I think it's much easier to contain. So unless they find the right coaching and the right system, you might see that team sort of be one of those, like, maybe gets through a round, but might struggle until they have the right system and those guys are playing the right way. So I mentioned the playing two-way and physicality and that commitment from your leaders to set the example for the rest of the team. I talked about how we define speed and all of that. And I would say that the third thing I've noticed and learned from the Panthers is that these things have to be built over time. Oftentimes people get surprised that things are happening. Like, why can't the Oilers all of a sudden score in the playoffs? It's like they've run against the structure. A team that has enough defense and goaltending and everything to keep them from scoring, and also that knows how to go the other way and make the most out of your weaknesses, which is your defense structure is not great, and your defensemen have a tendency to overplay, to want to play skill all the time. Like the nurse trying to make those stick handlings, Bouchard giving the puck away, CC, all these guys. There's a lack of sort of structure there in the way that they coach, because that has not been built over time, really, with a level of commitment that you need in order to play that. And thus that you have a harder time adapting to your opponent. Because adjustments doesn't mean doing everything completely different than what you've done. If you're asking a team to do that in the playoffs, that's not going to happen. Habits are built over time. The way that the team plays, the familiarity, the chemistry, what we call chemistry, is just understanding. Chemistry is anticipation. You know where guys are going to be. You know what's expected. The coaches hammer it home game after game after game. When you watch a team like the Oilers or a team like the Leafs, it does seem like I'm not saying the coaches are bad. I think that there's either a reluctance to get the star players to get everybody else to play within a really good system, or there's a reluctance to take away some of that skill, or tamper down some of the skill and say, maybe we don't need to be as flashy, we don't need to take as many risks. Maybe we need to kind of tone it down and find more balance, and the skill will be there and the ability to score. So the Oilers talk about scoring on the power play. Well, if that goes away, what do you have, right? You need to have something else in order to win, because you can always rely on that, right? The Panthers can win 5-3 or win 2-1, right? And I feel like the best teams can do that. The teams that win in the playoffs, they can do both. They can shut you down for a game, or they can take advantage of a bad night and put 5 on you. So I think that's the issue with some of these teams that have a hard time breaking through. They have not built that time over time. And I say that I've learned that from the Panthers because, we talked about this before. 3 years ago, they played a completely different style, loosey-goosey, run and gun. We allow more goals, and this is why Bob was not putting good numbers. People always want to blame Bob. He's playing better for sure, but the defense in front of him was atrocious. They would pinch in, they would cheat, they would be lazy, they would make bad plays. This is why Tampa beat us twice in 2 years in a row, even though we were the deeper team. Tampa beat us in the playoffs 2 years in a row because they knew how to play in the playoffs. They knew how to have that structure, how to block shots, how to sacrifice, how to wait for their opportunities, how to beat you. And yes, Vasilevsky had something to do with that, but listen, we played Vasilevsky this year and beat them in 5. So it's not just the goalie. It's that this year we knew how to play to really overcome that, and we're deeper than, in some ways maybe we were in previous years in terms of the experience and the size and the things you need, and Tampa's not as strong. So some of it can be cyclical, but I think at the end of the day, when you watch these teams that are really structured, I mean, again, Boston is a perfect example. They do not have the level of talent that most other teams out there have, whether young or not, and yet somehow they find themselves here. Even Carolina, they don't have the top end scoring talent. They have a lot of really good players, but Aho is a good player, but he's not like a 40-50 goal scorer. They don't have those kinds of guys, and yet they're always in the playoffs, always competing, and it feels a lot more balanced because they have the structure. They have a clear identity that they replicate year over year, and anybody coming into the team needs to buy into that identity or get out. And so that's what the Panthers and Maurice and Cito decided. Huberdeau out of here. We are out of here. We're going to let some guys go, Duclair eventually. And now we're going to bring bigger guys. We're going to play within this structure. Barkov, Kachuk going to lead the way. Ekblad. Everybody's going to get with the program. There were growing pains in the first half of the season that were not great, but then they figured it out, and now they're starting to look like a great core that, with some young infusion and more talent, which could happen in the next few years, they could have a window here where they can make more runs. And I think that that's what you need to sort of expect of your teams. Is your team looking to really demand that from your players? It's fun in the regular season to score a bunch of goals. You can make the playoffs. You can be the Leafs. You can be the Oilers. You could be a young, very talented team like New Jersey or Buffalo or Ottawa. And yet, it may take you a lot longer to get there. And all of a sudden, some of these guys are 25, 26, and you're like 27. You're like, why haven't we won? The Oilers have been swept twice in the last 3 years out of the playoffs, and could be swept again in 3 out of 4 years. And you're like, how can that happen to the best player in the game with another guy who's like top 5, top 3 player in the game? Well, for whatever reason, it's not just the way they built the team. Oilers have enough talent in that team with the right structure and that top end scoring talent to be able to win something. I just think it's like they haven't really built the system. And, once you know what your system is to make it more balanced and have a chance, maybe you do find that you don't need Cody Ceci, you don't need certain guys. You have to replace them with cheaper guys, but that better fit. Like the Mikolas of the world, like with the Panthers have done. Maybe bring in a guy like Oriel as a veteran to play a very specific role, or a guy like Rodriguez. And you kind of plug those holes with guys that may be cheaper and maybe your fan base is not as excited about, but they're going to plug in the hole because they're fitting the system you need. Like they need, Panthers wanted Mikolas because they needed a long, big defenseman to play that system that they have. And that would be a great replacement for somebody like Gudas, those kinds of guys, Mark Stahl, who was much older. That's an improvement. So they didn't need to go after flashy guys. They needed to go after somebody who'd be an improvement over Mark Stahl on that side. And so, but provide some of the same things that he was providing. So, yeah, guys, that's something I've noticed. It's not just, your top players can just be flashy and score a bunch. They need to really set the tone. They need to be able to sacrifice play 2 ways, show it on the ice. You also need, and, have that physicality, not be afraid of that. And you also need to be fast as a team. You need to be able to connect, break the puck out, defend. Even when you defend, your quickness and your defense is all connected. It's all built over time. And you need to have an identity and a system and a culture that starts with the coaching staff and the front office and then the players, and they have to buy in. Even with that, it's incredibly hard to win year over year in the NHL because it's such a hard sport. But if you don't have that, then you get stories like what we're seeing with the Oilers, starting to become a little bit like, okay, 4, 5, 6 years in, still can win with that talent. Same with the Leafs. People are starting to get frustrated with Buffalo. People are starting to get frustrated with Ottawa. Now some people are saying maybe in one more year of this and you blow it up. And yet you do have the talent. But again, your coaches maybe weren't doing what they needed to do to really get them to what they needed to do. And this is why Cito brought in Maurice and didn't keep, Bruno, because Brunette didn't have the experience to do that. He may still be a good coach, but what the Panthers needed to that shift was a veteran coach that knew how to do this and play the system and demand it. So, you hope that it works. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens with some of the other teams. A lot of coaching changes. That may be something that goes into the season. But again, watching the Panthers this year in the playoffs, watching them last year, watching them before that, I think that I've really learned that those 3 things are actually more key to me than just like just a one goalie or whatever. It is your culture, system, and identity, and the commitment to that for the whole team. Your leader setting the example to keep that structure and rely on it. And then the talent shines through, and your speed, the ability, your skill, that you show it as a team versus like, oh, just let Crosby cook. Like Crosby was a great setup person. Malkin, they would set up, involve other guys that, they never had like a great defensive core in those 2 cups that they won back to back. They had Letang or whatever, but they didn't have a great defense, but they had a great system. They knew how to play as a team. All right. So anyway, that's what I got so far. My brother and I will do something over the weekend. We'll break down game 4. Maybe it's 3-1. Maybe the Panthers are champs, and we'll do like a final recap. And then, we will do stuff over the summer, looking into the offseason, definitely free agency. We're going to break down a few other teams. We might go through different divisions. And yeah, give us a like, subscribe, share, just try to help us grow the channel, talk about hockey, try to be an educated fan. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think it takes for a team to win and whether you disagree with these takes if you made it this far. All right. Thank you, guys.